my name is Nick Foley. I am the customer support lead at Casa. I work primarily with our gold and silver customers, primarily through email support, live chat, knowledge base. Pretty much anything written is my domain, and occasionally I do webinars and talk to people here. So looking forward to getting started. One of the things I love about Casa customers is that they are very hyper-focused on the benefits that Bitcoin can bring to the world. And a lot of Casa customers are long-term hodlers and understand that their Bitcoin is more than just something for themselves to enrich themselves. It's something that can be their legacy that they can pass down to their children. So looking forward to giving some guidelines for our Casa customers. You might already be a Casa Gold customer. You might be a Casa Silver customer. You might not be a customer at all yet, and you've seen our tweets online or other marketing about this webinar. So without further ado, I will get started on legacy planning for your Bitcoin. So this is a webinar that's primarily focused on addressing inheritance needs for Casa Gold customers. And this is different from our actual inheritance product that we have available at our diamond level of membership. And we'll talk briefly about that a little bit later. But we'll go on to the next slide. Oh, I already messed it up. Let's see. I got to click on it first, then click next slide. I got this, guys. All right, so purpose of this webinar, explain what's needed to recover your Bitcoin. Okay, both in normally as you are using your app, as well as for what other people would need to know and what information they need to recover your Bitcoin. And give recommended options and guidance with regards to third-party information sharing and recovery of your account. So just to reiterate, these are guidelines, okay? And this is also to note, this is not about what action Casa can take on behalf of your beneficiaries, but this is rather about what steps that you can take now to ensure that the funds you protect with Casa can be accessed by your beneficiaries. So this is not a Casa product where we really do anything different to a person's accounts. These are just a guideline as to the kind of things that you as a Casa Gold customer should think about and make a plan as to what information you're going to share and how it's going to be accessible to your beneficiaries. So first of all, Casa Gold, what is it? Like I said, you may or may not be a Casa customer already. Casa Gold is a 2 of 3 multi-sig Bitcoin wallet. So there's 3 total keys. Any 2 of those keys can be used to spend funds from your key set. So while there are 3 keys, 1 key could be lost or totally inaccessible, and you would still be able to spend funds. That is by design with multi-sig. And it's not the case with a single signature wallet, such as somebody might be using one of these Trezors or Ledgers by themselves as their own wallet. With Casa, we leverage these devices and use them as one of the signing keys, or in some cases, 2 of the signing keys in your Casa setup. So there's 3 total keys. Any 2 keys can be used to spend funds. And to reiterate, Casa is not a custodian of funds. So we hold 1 of the keys, right? But that's not sufficient to move funds. In a 2 of 3 multi-sig setup, you need at least 2 key signatures in order to actually move the Bitcoin. Since Casa only holds 1 of those keys, we can be there for you in the event that you lose access to 1 of your keys, but we don't have access to customer funds. We can't, after a verification process, just say, okay, here's your Bitcoin. It involves the customer taking responsibility of their keys and having those keys accessible when the time comes. So again, you are responsible for those keys, and this is totally by design because it gives you more control over your wealth. Whereas with an exchange or something like that, or any kind of third-party custodian, you are trusting them to properly manage your private keys, and you're also trusting them to actually give you access to those private keys to move the Bitcoin when it's time to move them. As a lot of people know, there is an expression in the Bitcoin space, not your keys, not your coins. It's also worth noting that Casa does allow anonymous and pseudonymous signups with us. So you could potentially sign up for Casa with like a burner email, in the sense that you don't use that email address for anything else. You can create a specific pseudonymous email account primarily for use with Casa. You are fully within our terms of service to use a VPN or other steps that you want to take to mask your real identity. That is fine with us. So a note about anonymous signups: we don't have a default way to verify your identity, and this will be worth noting as we go later on in the webinar and we talk about verification. And just to compare ourselves to an exchange, again, not to make too many comparisons, but this is unlike an exchange which, when you sign up or you purchase Bitcoin, it requires identity verification. And they also have a legal account transfer process based on that verification that you provide when you first set up your account, or when it prompts you to verify your information. So Casa Gold Multisig has a couple different setup options. Now, one, which is the standard setup, uses one hardware device key. So for instance, this Trezor that I showed you as an example uses one hardware device key, one mobile key. It's a key which is stored on your phone, and the Casa Recovery Key. We have another setup, which we call the two hardware device setup, or sometimes we call it a non-standard setup. You opt out of the mobile key. So the non-standard setup uses two hardware keys and one Casa Recovery Key. So what is normally needed for key access? And this is not talking necessarily about what a beneficiary would need. This is what you normally need for key access. In a standard setup here, we're talking about, we'll start off with, you need your username, which is your email address. So you need to know what the email address is, as well as the password for your Casa account. Worth noting, you don't actually need access to the actual email unless you're resetting your password, in which case you would need access to the email address. You would also normally need a mobile key, which is stored on your device. So you need access to that key, which is on your device. We also back up and encrypt the mobile key into your phone's cloud service. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. You also need physical access to your hardware wallet device. And you also need the PIN code for your hardware wallet device, very important. Some people choose to write down a seed phrase. If you choose to write down a seed phrase, that seed phrase backup can restore your Casa signing key on a new device, and it actually does bypass the PIN code security. So our setup we consider to be optionally seedless. So you can choose to set up your hardware device and not retain that seed phrase backup and use it with Casa. The idea being is that if you were to lose that device, or it became damaged or otherwise unworkable, you still have two remaining keys in your key set. That being said, a lot of Gold customers do choose to write down that seed phrase. And again, like I mentioned, if something does happen to the device, that seed phrase can be used to restore your funds. So in this presentation, we're going to assume that there is no seed phrase backup, but it's something to keep in mind. So I did promise I would say a little bit more about the mobile key. And we have two people who are very contentedly staring at the mobile device. So this, the appropriate graphic stored on your device. Okay, so that mobile key is available for signing. It's stored in what's called a secure enclave of your phone. It's a section of the phone that stays separate from other applications. We also back this up. You can optionally back up your mobile key to your phone's integrated cloud service. So if you were using an iPhone, it would be encrypted and backed up to Apple. If you were using an Android phone, it would be encrypted and backed up to Google. And it can also be backed up with an encrypted QR code. So a beneficiary, for example, may not need to access your Apple or Google account if you have that encrypted QR code, which is very important key in our planning. So let's talk a little bit about the non-standard setup. We also call it a two hardware device setup. So this is what's normally needed to spend funds from that multi-sig key setup. Again, you need your username, your email address, and your password for your Casa account. Physical access to your hardware wallet devices, is plural this time because there's two hardware devices in this setup, right? Two hardware devices plus the Casa Recovery Key. The PIN code for the hardware wallet devices. Recovery planning in the event of your death, so planning for your death, involves sharing information with a trusted third party or beneficiary. So whoever you want your beneficiary to be, whether that be a spouse or other family member, or with an estate attorney. So we're going to talk about what information you share, because that's going to be the next question. What information should I choose to share? And as we go through this, keep in mind that you want to be very careful about what information you want to share. You don't want to share too little information, but you also don't want to share too much information or have a key quorum accessible all in one location. So we're going to walk through the recommended recovery plan for a standard setup. Again, this is what most Casa customers are using, which is the one hardware key, one mobile key, one recovery key. So these are the recommended items to share or make accessible to your beneficiaries. And this is still talking about the standard setup. And again, this could be spouse, other family member. This information should be kept secure and separate from your hardware device. And definitely consider sealing the information in tamper-evident packaging. So the first thing that you need to share, or a beneficiary needs access to, is your Casa account login information. That is your username, which is your email address, and your Casa account password. If they don't have access to the password, they need to reset the password, which does involve having access to your actual email account. The next thing that you should share is the hardware device, what location they are, as well as the hardware device PIN codes. And lastly, the mobile key QR code backup. A note about the hardware wallet devices. So I said we don't want to keep a key quorum in one place, right? So hardware wallet device should be kept in a separate geographic location from your home. So you don't want to make it the case where somebody could, God forbid, break into your home and force you to spend your Bitcoin. If that attacker had to hold you at gunpoint and walk you into your bank in order to access a safe deposit box to get the hardware device, it makes it much less likely that that attacker will even attempt that, much less be successful at it. So examples of where you can keep it: bank deposit box, second home, office safe, and your beneficiaries should know where to find the hardware device, and they should be able to access it, right? So maybe you and your spouse jointly own a deposit box at a bank, and you both have a key for it. Your spouse knows where the key is for it. To talk a little bit more about that mobile key QR backup, because it is so important in this scenario, this is an encrypted mobile key backup. So this QR code essentially can restore your mobile key on a new device, as long as you're signed into your same Casa account. It will be able to decrypt that and put it on your device. This by itself cannot be used to spend funds. So this QR code here is encrypted. So if somebody were to just get access and view that QR code, they would not be able to access that mobile key. And restoring that mobile key on a new device is just as simple as clicking the import backup and then using your phone's camera to scan this QR code. And as long as you're logged into your Casa account, or your beneficiary is logged into your Casa account, they'll be able to decrypt that mobile key. Not necessary if your beneficiary still has access to your phone and is able to unlock your phone. But we are going to assume there's a scenario where both you and your phone are not able to spend Bitcoin. So the mobile key QR code backup can only be used while logged into your specific Casa account. So that's worth noting. Your beneficiary will not be able to, for example, open their own Casa account. And we'll go back to the QR code, scan that QR code, and expect Casa App to recognize it, because it won't. That encryption key is tied to your specific Casa account. So again, that mobile key QR code backup, very important to print out or keep saved in like digitally, in a digital image of it in a password manager, for example. And it can only be used while logged into your specific Casa account. Okay, so that's an important thing to note. Okay, so let's walk through the recommended recovery plan for a non-standard setup. So what we just covered was that standard setup where you are using the mobile key. In this setup, you have 2 hardware devices as well as the Casa Recovery Key in your setup. So these are the recommended items to make accessible to your beneficiaries in that 2 hardware device setup. One is the Casa account login information, or alternatively, sovereign recovery instructions. And we will cover that, I think, in the next slide. And hardware devices and PIN codes. Okay, so both hardware devices, and ideally you use one PIN code that you share between the 2 hardware wallet devices. It makes it less likely that you're going to lose the PIN code. But some people do have separate PIN codes for each hardware wallet device that they have. And again, just to reiterate, the hardware wallet devices should be kept in separate geographic locations from your home. And not only that, but you should definitely consider separating the hardware devices themselves. For example, you don't want to be in a scenario where you keep both of your hardware wallet devices in a bank. You don't have a backup seed phrase anywhere. The bank catches on fire and burns to the ground, right? Unlikely scenario, but in that scenario, you would not be able to recover your Bitcoin, neither would your beneficiaries. So definitely consider storing them in separate locations, right? And you, again, you don't want to store them don't want to store both of them at your home. So one option is to keep one at your home, one in a bank deposit box, as an example. So to talk a little bit more about sovereign recovery, which I mentioned, sovereign recovery is meant for a kind of disaster scenario in which you totally can't access Casa servers anymore, in which Casa servers are offline. And it makes it possible to recover funds without needing login information to Casa App. So while the sovereign recovery is really intended for a kind of disaster scenario, you can use it in the event of your death, or the beneficiary can use it so that the beneficiary does not necessarily need access to the Casa App. So sovereign recovery, in the next slide, it shows how to grab that sovereign recovery info and save it. When you first set up your Casa key set, you are automatically emailed this information. You can grab it again at any time by going into your accounts tab in Casa App and then just tapping send sovereign recovery info. And that will send you an email containing instructions on how to restore your Bitcoin outside of Casa App using an open source third-party app. You can use either Electrum or Spectre and potentially other open source Bitcoin wallets that are totally unrelated to Casa. So really, sovereign recovery is there to make it so that Casa is not a single point of failure. And this is what part of that email looks like. It just says sovereign recovery info for basic multisig. And then it shows you very important information like the hardware wallet derivation paths, as well as the extended public keys for your various keys in Casa App. And it also shows that email has step-by-step how to download Electrum and how to recover your funds outside of Electrum. So potentially, if your beneficiary has access to those 2 hardware wallet devices, as well as the PIN code, and they also have those sovereign recovery instructions printed out, they will be able to recover your Bitcoin. So both of those, the standard setup as well as the non-standard setup, you can make a plan and share appropriate information to spend. I will say, though, that the non-standard setup with the 2 hardware wallet devices does make third-party recovery a little bit simpler, just because it does not require that your beneficiary even log into your Casa account at all, right? They can completely bypass Casa and they can go straight to Electrum or Spectre, where they can use those hardware wallet devices and PIN codes to recover their funds totally outside of Casa App. So none of the keys, none of the private keys, Bitcoin keys that you're generating in Casa App are in any way proprietary to Casa App. Casa App is just a very simple, easy to use interface to just make multisig really accessible and easy for a lot of people. So moving on. A note about the third key. So some people might be asking, well, there's the Casa Recovery Key. What's that all about? So when you first set up your multi-sig key set, you also set up the Casa Recovery Key. And this is the key that's held and stored by Casa. We're the ones who manage this one key. When you set it up, you are asked to answer 3 different security questions. And if you ever need to use that recovery key, and it's not in normal operation, you wouldn't ever normally need it. You would just use it in case of one of your other keys was lost. You set up 3 answers and 3 security questions. And then if you ever need to use it, you answer those 3 security questions and you go through a 7-day security delay. And Casa will sign that transaction, right? That transaction still needs one other signature, but Casa will sign it and make it that much easier for you to actually sign the transaction. We didn't really include this in our plan just because it requires more information to be shared. To access the Casa Recovery Key, it requires login information as well as the answers to the 3 security questions, right? And all of that info must be shared with the beneficiary. And there is that 7-day security delay, right? But useful to note that this can be used in place of any other key, right? So if the mobile key QR code backup was destroyed for any reason, and your beneficiary knew what the answers to your security questions were, as well as the login information for Casa App, they can have Casa apply that signature. So documentation is very important, and we'll talk a little bit more about documentation. So you want to write down your recovery plan and share it with your beneficiary or beneficiaries. Some things to note: you want to keep your hardware devices separate, right? You don't ever want a key quorum in one place to spend funds. So wherever those hardware devices are kept, your beneficiary does need to know how to access those, as well as the PIN codes, right? You want to make your documentation very clear and easy to follow. We don't want obscure treasure maps that have rhymes as some clues as to where X marks the spot, right? Be very careful about what you document. Be careful about where you store the documentation. And lastly, it's highly recommended that wherever you have your documentation, whatever that documentation is, that you seal it in tamper-evident packaging. You can go on Amazon and order very cheap not reusable, but one-time use bags, which is just like basically a plastic bag that has a tamper-evident seal. So you know for sure if that was ever opened, it would be very evident based on how the packaging is designed. So this is just an example of the recovery documentation that I might have. And this is just one page. It's very simple, and it can be this simple. So this is just an example. And this is why it's in italicized in quotes. My recovery plan for Bitcoin secured by Casa. Okay, and maybe I keep this information in my home safe. Login info for my Casa account is kept in my password manager. The password for that password manager is written down in our separate family safe, maybe that we have at another home. The mobile key QR code encrypted backup for Casa Multisig is printed out and kept here in our home safe. Our hardware device is kept at the bank safe deposit box. PIN code for hardware wallet device is kept here in our home safe, as well as duplicated in the other family safe. Right? So you notice we're not keeping the PIN code and the hardware device together. We're keeping them separate. You notice that we're not keeping the hardware device at our home, in our home safe, along with other keys to spend funds. We're keeping it in a separate geographic location, and we're separating all of this information. We're making it difficult on purpose to spend funds, right? So here might be the steps that I might write down. You would download Casa App. You can go to keys.casa/download from any mobile device, and it'll automatically bring you to either Google Play Store or Apple App Store. You can restore the mobile key using the printed QR code backup. So again, it's just this import-export function. It's really simple in Casa App. And you would retrieve the hardware device from the bank, retrieve the PIN code from the safe, use the mobile key and hardware device when spending funds from Casa. Okay. So you'll notice that this is just a very, very simple instructions. It's not obscure. It doesn't have rhymes or clues or riddles to guess at what we're saying. It's not like every other word or every other letter in each word spells out something, right? It's very clear and easy, but at the same time, how this is written is that if somebody were to break into your home and your safe and they got access to this recovery instructions, they still would not be able to spend the Bitcoin because you need to physically travel to, in this case, 2 separate geographic locations to get the hardware device as well as the PIN code, right? And this is just to reiterate, what's needed to spend funds is not all in one place. They're separated geographically on purpose so that someone with access to your documentation could not use the documentation alone to spend funds. And also keep in mind, and remember, Casa has very limited ways of verifying you. And also worth noting, anyone who has this information, even if they are not you, in one place, can spend funds from your multisig key set without even contacting Casa, right? So if you had your hardware device, as well as your mobile key backup, as well as you've written down your login information for Casa App, someone could potentially break into your home, either force you to spend your Bitcoin, or by just looking at that documentation would be able to spend your Bitcoin, right? So nothing in these recommendations for legacy planning with gold involves contacting Casa at all, because really, since we are very limited in the amount of keys that we hold, there's very limited assistance that we at Casa can offer to your beneficiary to recover your Bitcoin. So I point out that membership upgrade, we have different membership levels upwards from gold. It goes to platinum and then to diamond. So you have more options depending on your membership level. So at platinum, you have a shared accounts feature, which is coming up to be released very soon. Little sneak peek here. I got approval to mention it. The shared accounts is a formal method of account setup, which allows up to 2 individuals to share equal access to a Casa account. So most commonly, that would be a spouse, but it can be somebody else, to share equal access to a Casa account, as well as the Bitcoin protected by that account. Shared accounts uses a formal verification method, which involves upfront account verification of multiple account holders. Platinum, just in general, the plan Platinum is recommended if you're securing anywhere from $75,000 to $500,000 worth of Bitcoin. That's just a recommendation. You can store a lot more than that or a lot less than that on any of our plan levels. That's just the recommendation. Platinum also gives you access to a 3 of 5 key set instead of a 2 of 3. So in a 3 of 5 key set, you have 3 hardware wallet devices. You have the mobile key again, and you also have that Casa Recovery Key, which is verified in a different way, but it's still one key held by Casa. That 3 of 5 allows you to more greatly geographically distribute your coins. And Diamond, we have a very thorough, well thought out inheritance plan at Diamond level. And the summary on what inheritance is, that product at the Diamond level, is you set up 2 recovery custodians that will have control of your Bitcoin if you die. Unlike shared accounts, this only gives account access to another after your death, rather than shared accounts, which give access to another person just in normal operation of the app. Casa will work directly with your recovery custodians and assist during the recovery process. So that is a kind of a perk or an option, a product that we offer at our Diamond level of membership. Generally, again, this is just a recommendation. We recommend Diamond for anyone securing over $500,000 worth of Bitcoin. So to recap, and then we'll go into Q&A. Your legacy solution will vary based on your account key setup. So whether that's the standard setup or the non-standard setup, what information you share and how you share that will vary, right? Secure information sharing and documentation is key to ensuring recovery by your beneficiary. Consider upgrading your membership if it makes sense for you. You're welcome to chat with our team about your needs. We'll send you an email tomorrow with a little recap on this, and we'll also give you a link if you wanted to book a call with a team member, and you can ask us any questions about any level of our membership. So that's a quick recap, and now it's Q&A time. I believe that AJ may have been answering some of the questions already. But let me start off with going into the Q&A box here. And I'm definitely going to take a sip of water, so bear with me. Someone asks, under a 2 hardware Casa setup, how would I approve a transaction step by step? Example, if I use 2 hardware wallets and one is at a bank safe, do I need to bring a laptop over to the bank to sign the transaction using that hardware wallet? That is an option. You can, just so you can keep your devices separate geographically, rather than going out and collecting your devices and then bringing them all to your home, because even temporarily, that's still a key quorum that you have in one place, right? So yeah, I think the general recommendation is that you either retrieve one key at a time. So I would go grab a key, bring it back, sign with that key, return the key. Another option, like you mentioned here in the question, is to bring a laptop and maybe use an internet connection and tether from your mobile phone is an option. So you have internet connection on that laptop, and then sign the transaction right there at the bank, for example, and then go to your next location. Someone asks, what if a family member can't reset your password to get into Casa App? So that's why it's important that you share the username and password if you so desire. If in order to reset the password, they do need access to your email account. So if you forget the password, you click a button that says, I forgot my password. We send you an email. So you need access to that email. You click that link. It opens up app.keys.casa. You reset your Casa account password from there. So in certain scenarios, like a 2 hardware device setup, for example, with the sovereign recovery instructions, you don't need access to that Casa account at all. So that's very important information to have. If somebody both can't reset your password as well as can't access their email account, then that can be problematic, right? So that's why we're doing the webinar and going over those types of questions and scenarios, because it's worth thinking about a lot of different edge cases like that. Let's see. Hi Nick, great job so far. I'm due for an upgraded phone. Okay, so somebody wants to upgrade their phone. What's the process look like for transferring the mobile keys to a new phone, and any other OPSEC concerns with this? So using that, so there's 2 ways. Let's say that you were just upgrading your phone to a new phone. Normally, you don't even need that QR code backup, because that backup is encrypted with your phone's cloud service. So if you upgraded your phone to a new one, all you would do is you would set up the phone as normal. Most people log into their, let's say it's an iPhone, most people would log into their Apple account when they set up their phone. You would log into your Casa account, and as long as you're logged into that same Apple account in the system settings of your phone, you just go to the mobile key. It's a guided process. The app says we can't find the key on the device. You tap that you want to restore the key, and Casa App searches for that backup. It pulls it onto Casa App, it decrypts it, and then it's available for signing on your new phone. Alternatively, you can use that QR code backup, that QR code that you print out, and you can open up your new phone. And in this scenario, you don't have to be logged into that same Apple account in the system settings. You can be logged into a totally different account, or maybe you transition from iPhone to Android, for example, or from Android to iPhone, and you can't sign into that same cloud account. Then you could import that mobile key using that encrypted backup. You would just go to the app, and it would you tap on the mobile key. It has an import export feature. You tap on that, and then that's it. All right, any other questions for the Q&A box? Please type them now. I think AJ's been in chat, but I'll kind of breeze through chat here. All right. I think that's all. Thank you, AJ, for assisting with questions. Thank you all so much for attending the webinar. Really appreciate it. If you have any other questions, please email us help@team.casa, or like I mentioned, we'll have that email going out to you tomorrow that may answer some of your questions or give the opportunity for you to speak directly with one of our team members. So it's been a pleasure. We do plan on putting this onto YouTube. And if you wanted to share this webinar with somebody else later, I'll do a little bit of magic editing and pop it on there. So thank you all so much and have a wonderful day.